Well, hello, everyone. I'm so thrilled that you are here today. I am thrilled to have my guest, Lisa Stevens, here. I have been able to read Lisa's new book. It is so powerful and encouraging, filled with great hope. And so I'm thrilled to have Lisa sitting here with us to chat today. So, welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Krista. I'm so excited to be here with you.
And like I said, your book is incredible. As I was jotting down some questions, like, wow, I think I could talk to you for hours about
Oh,
your whole testimony and how God has worked in your life. But to start with, I would love for you to share with everyone listening a little bit of your background, which I know affects so many young women who have had tumultuous upbringings, which might have led you to becoming a teen mom yourself.
yes, that is so incredibly true. All of the teen moms I've worked with throughout my career with teen mamas, they almost always have a pretty tumultuous family background, and mine was no different. I grew up in a home with an awful lot of chaos. My dad was kind of an off and on alcoholic and definitely off and on worked more off than on. And my mom, tried to keep it all together, but she had four kiddos under the age of four. So she had me and then twins a year later, and then another baby a year after that. And one of the most difficult probably parts of my childhood was losing my brother when I was 7 and he was 6 in a backyard accident. And my parents were not healthy before that happened, but certainly after that happened, it became much more difficult for them. I don't know that I think my mom was a believer, is a believer. My dad has passed away. I don't think he ever reconciled with God. After that happened. I pray that and hope that, but I don't know. So I grew up in a home where I most of the time felt like I was protecting my younger siblings and keeping them, safe from sort of the chaos that was happening at home. And oftentimes the moms I work with, it's very much the same. They feel like they really are in the position of being responsible for younger siblings, oftentimes getting them ready for school and getting them out the door and dealing with parents who are alcohol or drug addicted and really kind of caring for the family even when they are very young, as young as 8 or 9 years old themselves. And then my teenage years were, I actually was interestingly a pretty good child in the respect that I wanted to not get in trouble. But I met a boy when I was 16, and he was and is the love of my life, which is not common to get to say that you're still married after all this many years. But we got pregnant when we were 16, we had just turned 17, and got married and have been married for 39 years.
That's
We
great.
had our first little baby boy when we were 18. So we were teenage parents, and that was really the beginning of this journey.
That was fascinating story. So as I was reading in your book, I have a 19-year-old son. He's my youngest, and I had to share. Like, I had to put the book down and, like, run over to him and, like, wow, what an incredible story. I will say your husband was so mature
He
as a
was.
teenage boy, and it's like, "We need to get married." And you jumped in with both feet. That's really incredible.
Yeah, we were very blessed to have a lot of support from his parents, and I think that's the reason he was so mature. He has really amazing parents who came alongside us, who played a very influential role in my life and certainly in his, as well as the lives of our kids and now great grandkids that they have.
That's cool. So you mentioned a little bit that it doesn't sound like you grew up with a house that had faith. How did you come to know the Lord?
So my grandmother was the secretary of the Lutheran church in little town Colorado Springs. Colorado was very small back then, and I loved going to church with my grandma. Church was a place where there was order. To me, it seemed like my house, my personal home, was always kind of chaotic, and at church, everything happened in a certain order. Everything
Mm,
happened. I guess today, as an adult, I would say it was maybe a more liturgical church where there was an order to the worship and an order to how, when you sang and when you bowed, put your knees on the kneeler at this particular church. And everything just felt safe because it was so orderly and you knew what was going to happen. And so it was maybe more as a child a feeling of safety than it was an understanding or knowledge of God as a someone who was really truly a father that you would have a relationship with. And that didn't come probably until later, after my mother-in-law was really adamant that I join MOPS, which is now called the Mom Co. That's going to be hard for me to change their name in my head, but they're now called the Mom Co. And it was the first time I'd ever been around women who prayed out loud. And I thought they were maybe a little bit crazy, but yet they were so genuine and so warm and so welcoming. Especially, I was very nervous to go to this group because I thought, as a teenage mom, here are all these women who did it right. They got married and then had their child. And here I was sort of pretending to be a grown up, coming into this group, and literally had just gotten my braces removed to get married. And yet they were just so genuine and their faith was so authentic, and I just learned so much from them. And I'd had sort of an internal relationship with God where, I'd talked to Jesus a lot. So I think I probably truly did know Jesus as a child, but it wasn't until late teenage years joining that MOPS group or MOMCO group that I was surrounded by Christian women that I could learn from. And my mother-in-law was such a huge influence in my life and was the first person who told me it was okay to question God. Like, you can open the Bible and read it and ask questions. And I really felt like you had to behave. Like, that was, I don't know how that became instilled in me. It just was something that I felt that I needed to behave for God and be a good girl in quotation marks, and don't question, because that would not be being a good girl. That was so not true. He loves to open up his heart to us. He loves to hear our questions and let us find his answers in the Bible. And I mean, for the longest time, I didn't know how to look up Bible verses. I just would open it randomly and read something.
Oh, wonderful that you were able to join at such a young age a MOPS group. I was in MOPS
Yeah,
as well. I have such great
love it.
memories. So many wonderful friends that I met. We moved to different cities, so I was able to be in a couple different MOPS groups, and so incredible to sit there with other women who just talked about their struggles
Yeah.
and their joy also of having children. So, yeah, wonderful group. Nice that
Yeah,
you
it
could
was. I
join.
would literally show up sometimes on the wrong Tuesday because it was on, the second and fourth Tuesday, and I'd accidentally show up on the fifth Tuesday and the church parking lot would be completely empty, and I'd sit there and cry because I missed mops. Because you got to that point where you needed that mom connection so badly. Like, you just needed that time, a little bit of time away from your kids and time to be with other moms who could relate with you that, yeah, my child won't drink milk either, and are they gonna die? Like, or I had a terrible mom morning and I yelled at the kids all the way to mops, and somebody else saying, we've got you, girl. Like, it was just a place you could be real. It is a place still where you can be real with other moms.
So cool. Well, I want to dive into your wonderful book, which is called A Place to Belong. And there's so many great points in here, but one of the things you talk about is how God doesn't call the qualified, but rather qualifies the called. And I feel that so strongly in my heart as well. And I would love for you to share with others how that resonates with you and what does that mean to you?
My goodness, I tell people all the time. So Hope House has been around for 21 years. We're a fairly large organization in Colorado now and just beginning to sort of spread nationally. And so I get asked the question all the time, well, what's your background? And people are expecting to hear, oh, I have a degree in social work or a master's in something or other. And I tell them my background is J.C. Penney's and home daycare. Those are literally the two things I did after graduating high school, which I did by the skin of my teeth because I was pregnant, and never did have well, I probably did at one point have the opportunity to go to college, but building Hope House was a calling, and that calling happened right about the same time that I thought in my mind and my plans that I would be going to school. That was what I intended to do. And God, as He will, has plans that are different than ours. And so really my background, and what I say all the time is, when God calls you to do something that feels too big, or like, who me, like, you're literally sitting there going, wait, what? I'm just this. I'm just a hairstylist. I'm just something. And God's sitting there going, you're not just anything. You're exactly who I created you to be, to do the work that I'm putting before you. You just have to be brave enough to take that first step and say yes. And if you say yes, then I promise you, I will make the rest happen. And He typically, at least in my experience, makes that happen by connecting you up with all these other amazing people who have the things that you think you don't have. So the education I didn't have, the experience running a business that I didn't have, the experience managing people, I had never been a boss in quotation marks, all the things that I did not have, God surrounded me with through the most amazing people. And that's just been my experience, that when we're brave enough to say yes, He will literally bring the people around you that He is also tapping on the shoulder to say, hey, I want you to go hang out over here. I want you to see what's happening over here.
I'm gonna just say, "Hear, hear. Amen," because that's been my experience too. When I stepped out, I left my corporate career, and God was calling me to write my first book a couple of years ago. I'm like, "I don't know how to write a book," but He brought
Right,
so many people right into my path, and it's great when you take that big leap of faith. God's right there, ready to
right
walk with
there.
you.
Love it.
So I was struck by several miracles that you talked about in your book, and one of them being a miracle of land. And I
Yes.
feel that that is where so many Christians are going to be walking into this next few years, is land. And I would love for you to share that story.
My goodness. When you look at things from, when you look at what's behind you, it all seems like it was so easy, right? Like, we're just now this ministry that has, a campus and serves 270 girls, teen moms, and their kids a year. And like, it just somehow happened overnight. And that's so not true. But when we very first got started, we had the opportunity to move into well, it's not too small. It's a 5,500 square foot brick home. It sat on some land in Arvada, Colorado. The owner was planning to develop the property and offered to let us move in and open our home for teen moms. That was how we started. And we had our first two teenage moms move into the house. And we had just barely gotten kind of starting to practice all this work we had done for 3 years to develop a program that would where we could come around our teenage moms and help them to become self-sufficient while also, helping them to understand how much God loves them. And it looked great on paper. We'd done all this research, and we just got these two mamas, and we're starting to figure out that what looked great on paper might not always work in person, and really tweaking things and just loving these moms. And I get a phone call from David Nestor, who was the gentleman who was the president of the board of this group that was going to develop this property. And he says, hey, we're going to tear that house down quicker than we thought we were going to, because we just got annexed into the city of Arvada. And I'm panicking and thinking, oh no, we just got these first two mamas. We're going to make them homeless all over again. We literally just opened. We have no money. We're barely paying the bills. There's no way we can go out and find, and they were giving us rent for $350 a month. So there was no way we could go out and find a place that we could afford to even rent to move these mamas to. And literally a week later, after I'd spent a week arguing with God, David calls me and says, okay, our board met and we decided that we will give you the house, but you have to pick it up and move it off of our property. And I was just stunned. I mean, at that point in time, that many years ago, there was such a thing as the yellow pages. So I'm looking up in the yellow pages, house movers, like, how do you move a house? And we were able to get $100,000 loan, which seemed like a lot of money, on the top half of a house, because the bottom half was a basement and it was going to get plowed under. And we're going to take this $100,000 and go buy land and move the house there, and it's all going to be wonderful. And we end up finding a house mover that it cost $40,000 to move the house. So we only had 60,000 left. He told us, this house mover, that we could only move the house within 7 miles. And we believed him, because we were all so naive and we had no idea. Turned out that he did not want to get a permit to move the house down what is Sheridan, which is Sheridan Boulevard, is a state highway in Colorado. And so he didn't want to have to get a permit. Well, we just believed him. We start looking for land within 7 miles. Can't find anything. Get a call from the realtor one night saying, okay, there's nothing within 20 miles that you can even begin to afford. We're done. And I start fighting with God again. And, well, really, God, why would you give us a house and not give us land? And I don't understand. And The next day I come into work and I get a phone call from the pastor of this church next door or down the street from us that I had never met in my life. We had this beautiful older woman who would come bring us laundry soap for our laundry room, and she attended that church. And she had gone to the pastor and told him, "Hey, pastor, I volunteer at this place called Hope House, and they've got a little house and they need to move it and they need help." And he says, "Well, we're an elderly church, we're a small church, we really can't help." And she said, "Well, pastor, they don't need money, they just need land." And he says, "Well, we have land." So he calls me up, this guy I've never even met, and says, "Hey, are you the people looking for land?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, we have some we want to give you." And I literally didn't say thank you. I almost fell off my chair. I'm like, "Who are you? What and what again?" And it turns out it's this pastor of a church that was literally 6 blocks down and 1 block over from where that house used to sit. So not 7 miles, 7 blocks.
Wow.
And he had met with his trustees of his church, and they wanted to offer to give us this land. And so this church has they at the time had about 3 acres of land, and a little piece of it they wanted to give us. And so my co-founder and I went to the city of Arvada and said, "Hey, we've got this church that wants to give us land. How do you do this? How do you subdivide, a piece of land from there?" Because I didn't even know what the word meant. And the city planner just looks at me and says, "That's not happening. There's literally no way. This house that you're wanting to move has to be off that property in the next 2 months in order for them to develop the project that Rocky Mountain Housing wanted to develop. And it takes over a year to rezone." And I'm like, "Oh no." So I'm standing there at the counter once again, arguing with God, like, "Why would you give us a house and land? And now it's not even possible." And my sweet program officer at the time, program director Robin, just says, "Could you just go look and see what the zoning is?" And it had to be an RL zoning for multifamily. And so she just rolls her eyes at us, but she goes over to this big lateral file cabinet and pulls out this really big plat map, and down in the corner is a big green stamp, RL. And it turned out that the church had literally zoned just that piece, just the piece they wanted to give us. The pastor didn't even know this, 25 years prior, for a maternity home, and they had never put a maternity home on the property. So the zoning that we needed for what is considered a group home was the same as what was needed for a maternity home. And God had already ordained it before I was ever even a teenage mom. And still today, when I tell that story, I just get goosebumps because it's such an example of how God knows the beginning from the end. And we kind of have our Christian language like, "Oh yeah, God knows the beginning from the end." And it's like, what does that mean? And what that means is he knew, like he moved the hearts of the people in that church all those years prior, many of them who were no longer there, to subdivide this piece of land and zone it for something that didn't even exist and didn't come into existence for 25 more years. Like way before I was a teen mom, God was already working and moving in that church, and it just astounds me.
It's a miracle upon miracle within that story,
Yes.
and I can just see your faith growing as each step of the way that God is revealing the plan that He had for you and your ministry all along as you were continuing continuing to walk or take that huge leap of faith into this new unknown thing. Wow. That is
Yeah,
so
so
amazing.
so many leaps of faith, and so many times where it was me saying, "Well, I don't have the faith. I don't think God
Mhm.
can do this." And someone else coming alongside me saying, "Let's just trust. Let's take one more step and let's just trust." So I always try to say it's not like I had this outsized faith, this like bigger than most people have, because I didn't. I did and still do spend a lot of time talking to God about, "What are you doing? Have you seen the
Yeah.
checkbook lately? We don't have enough for whatever it is."
Yeah.
And you'd think after all these years of doing ministry with him, I would know that he will be faithful. But there so often has to be someone else next to me saying, "God's got this. God is
Mm.
gonna look behind us and see what he's done, and then just take that next step with him and see where
Yeah.
it goes next."
That's good. So important to have a community surrounding you that's praying for you and with you and helping to grow your faith. I love that. I also wanted to talk about this story. I believe it was about 2008, if I'm correct, during the Great Recession, and it kind of
Yes.
looks like we're going to be going into another recession. And you had something that jumped off the pages at me where I believe you heard, what are you going to do with what God gave you? And it just made me sit and reflect. It's like, okay, for my own business, like, okay, there, God, I know that there's new ways to go about things that might not actually require finances. Can you share a little insight into that path that you walked?
Yeah, that I will say, as a leader, that was probably the hardest lessons I've ever learned to lead through the Great Recession. It was an incredibly difficult time for people. Many people lost their entire life savings and were having to work much later than had planned, and other people were losing jobs, and we were not going to receive the kind of money that we needed to move ahead with plans we had made. We had planned to expand and get a little bit bigger. We were utilizing space at our church next door to the house after they donated the land to expand into doing beyond residential. We began doing a GED program and some other programming using the church building. Our plan was to go out and find our own space to start doing all this, what we called resource center work in. And as God would know, but we did not know that wasn't going to happen. The world sort of just crumbled. And
Yeah.
not only did we have to a couple of people go, which that is the single most difficult thing to do as a leader of people and an employer, is to have to sit down with someone and say, we have to let you go, especially in a time when many of them, their husbands, were also being let go from their job. It was heartbreaking. But the most important thing was to make sure that we kept the staffing that we needed for the teen moms who lived in the house, because we didn't want to make them homeless. And I had gone to church one morning just like totally despondent over this and not knowing what to do. And I have no idea what the sermon was about, but one thing the pastor said just jumped out at me, and it was, I may not be going to give you more, but what are you going to do with what I've already given you? And I left that service just pondering that, what are you going to do with what I've already given you? And I went back to, the team at Hope House, and we pondered that together, and we talked about what are the things we have currently. And one of the things we had currently was that the number of people who wanted to volunteer had grown exponentially because people had lost jobs. And so they had some time, even if they didn't have money. And so we made the decision that we also at the time had two young mamas who were sisters who had literally become homeless, and we could not take them in because we didn't have enough staffing, and we couldn't hire more people. I had just let people go. And so we turned to these volunteers and said, would you consider being true staff? Like, you have to come to staff meetings, you have to show up for shifts. It's not volunteer work. Like, you're staff without being paid. And we had the most amazing women step forward and say, I will say yes to God for this. And because they said yes to being a volunteer, two of them stayed for multiple years as volunteer staff. We were able to bring those two moms into the home, and they were able to start their journey to healing and becoming self-sufficient themselves.
Yeah, that is such an incredible story. How, again, how God works all things together for good for those that love him and are willing to take those leaps of
Yeah,
faith. That's beautiful.
yeah.
I would love to shift gears a little bit and talk about these young mamas that you have been ministering to for over 21 years. That's so incredible. Is there a young lady who sticks out in your mind who might have
Mhm.
been resistant or
Yes.
untrustworthy of kind of like the whole process and believing that people can really love them and especially God?
Oh, so well, that's pretty much all of them. And in my own experience, and certainly one of the things that has not changed since way back in 1986 when I became a teen mom, is that teen moms are really, they face so much judgment and so much stigma, and there's so much shame attached to being a teenage mom. And many times it's your family. For our moms who have been involved in a church, it can often be their church that shuns them or pushes them out. And literally, you walk into the grocery store with a baby on your hip and someone's looking at you like, are you the big sister or is that your baby? And that's people who are just being curious. Then there's outright, discrimination, and going to a doctor's office and having a doctor just talk down to you or not listen to you or treat you like you're just so incompetent. And our mamas are so brave and so resilient and so courageous. And so determined to build a better life for their kiddo than what they experienced. And that's our secret sauce at Hope House. We call that mommy motivation. And mommy motivation is our secret sauce. It is what will drive a teen mom to work so hard to get her G, take opportunities she never knew existed, because all of the moms we work with are trying to break the cycle of generational poverty. And they don't know that there's such a thing as a Pell Grant. They don't know that there's an opportunity to go to college. Nobody in their family, many times no one's graduated high school, and certainly no one has gone to college. And they have so little family support coming around them. So when I think back to Janelle, one of our mamas who was a very quiet mom, they always come through the door very defensive because they don't believe that we actually care. They are here for something they think we can give them because they've heard we can get our GED for free, or we heard that you might help us pay for a car bill or something else. Or I can get free diapers, not because, oh, I really believe that you love me and you want to teach me that Jesus loves me. They don't come through the door for that. So
Yeah.
when they come through the door, it has to be this sense of complete welcoming and complete belonging. Hence the name of the book, A Place to Belong. When they come in those doors, they are, without fail, will tell me later, never felt so much peace or so much welcome or such true like love. Like, people just wanted to hug me and talk to me about my baby, and they're genuinely interested in me and they believe in me. And Janelle had come very quiet, hadn't revealed a lot to anybody about herself or her circumstances, but she came faithfully to work on her GED. And one night, and I'm not even sure why I'm the one she called, because I didn't work directly with the mamas at this point in our organizational development, but she had my number and she called one night and said, I'm staying in my car with my two boys. It's about to snow. It was going to be a Colorado blizzard, and I'm scared that I don't have enough gas to keep the car warm overnight. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm coming. I stopped at McDonald's to get them food because they were, parked in a parking lot, got them some food, got them into a hotel for a couple of nights. And then we were able to get Janelle moved into our residential program. That girl soared. She excelled. Just by being in a safe environment. She'd suffered a series of incidences of homelessness during her childhood, moving in and out of shelters, had actually been on the street with her first son, sleeping, literally on the street. And when that happens, they're typically hiding. So they're not the visible homeless. When our moms are homeless, they're the invisible homeless. They're hiding somewhere, or they're literally staying on someone's couch and then moving every few days. This mom just thrived in a safe and stable environment where she was surrounded by love. She was able to finish her GED. We helped her to get into college, and she was the first mom who was ever interested in a degree in applied science, and she wanted to become a machinist. I have no idea how she even knew, and it just so happened, I think of her often because my husband is a machinist, and she's our first and only machinist, and so my husband was always so like just taken with the fact that she wanted to be a machinist. And we literally attended her college graduation. We had, so only nationally, only 2% of teenage moms graduate from college. So she had decorated the back of her graduation cap with this big, I am the 2%, is what she wrote on the back of
Oh, I love that.
her graduation cap. And our graduation rate now is about 22% of our teenage moms graduate from college. And we're continuing to see that go up. But Janelle, it was not a straight and easy path. And our moms oftentimes go backwards before they go forwards, and we have a lot of kind of backwards and forwards. But she today is married. She owns her own home. She's a machinist at Ball Aerospace.
Oh.
She is the picture that you can see behind me, and this is a podcast, but behind me there is a picture framed of, it looks like a bunch of birds in the air, but it's actually Janelle's son, Joseph, drew me a picture of all these little stick figure moms throwing something up in the air, and he said it was the GED graduation when all the moms threw their caps in the air, and he remembered his mom getting her GED and throwing her hat in the air with all the other mommies. And it was the first picture I was given when we moved into our brand new resource center, which is a whole nother story, but I framed it so I could remember that Joseph grew up at Hope House, and Joseph considered Hope House home. And now he's a teenager and doing his own high school journey, doing great.
That is such a beautiful and encouraging story. Thank you so much for sharing. Wow, 22% of your mamas are college graduates.
Yeah.
That's astounding. I
Yeah.
would love to dig a little deeper into your organization because you talked about that you are wanting to expand
Yeah.
outside of Colorado, which is so exciting. And so I want to give those ladies that are listening an opportunity to connect with your organization, and maybe they would like to be volunteers for your organization or something else. Please share.
Absolutely. So Hope House, Colorado, we from the beginning felt like there would be more Hope Houses, that we wanted there to be an opportunity for, my initial vision was sort of that there might be homes around Colorado where we had Hope House homes. And God didn't develop it that way. My vision was not his vision. We have still just one Hope House home on our campus where we can serve 6 teenage moms and their kiddos. Years after we opened, had moved the home from the land it had been on and then redeveloped it here on this property, we were able to purchase the additional acreage from the church and build a new resource center where we now offer about 275 moms a year come through our programming to earn their GED or a high school diploma, move on to college or career, get help with financial literacy, legal advocacy, parenting classes. We're very focused on mental health and mental well-being, lots of counseling and help with how do I have healthy relationships? What does that even look like? And then we're just this month opening a brand new early learning center on our property where we'll serve about 104 children of our teenage moms. So the three primary barriers to self-sufficiency are housing, childcare, and transportation.
Mm.
So we work in depth in housing, helping our moms to find housing, and have just removed the barrier to childcare for a lot of our mamas. Transportation is still just an issue. And as we've been growing over the years, we've just received so many calls from women like me who God just laid it on their heart. And these are women who I mentioned we have, so one of our very first affiliate, and we call our affiliates they're Hope House Canyon City or Hope House Northern Colorado. Our first outside of Colorado will be Hope House Orange County. But the woman who started Hope House NoCo, Northern Colorado, was a hairstylist, and she was sitting in church. She worked with young teenage moms through Young Lives. Young Lives is like the arm of Young Life that works with teenage mamas. And in church, she just felt God say, "I want you to open a home for teen moms." She had never heard of Hope House. She was like, "Okay." God said, "I need to open a home for teen moms. It's what our mamas need."
Mm.
And she went home and like dreamed up all the things that her moms would need if she was able to open a home for teen moms. And then someone told her about Hope House, and she came for a visit. And she's like, all the things I had papered around my walls, all the things our moms would need, you were offering. And so I just knew I needed to be that. I need to be a Hope House because you're doing all these things already. And it was our opportunity to come alongside her and say, we can teach you how to do this. We've been doing it for 20 years successfully. Not always. There are so many, bumps in the road, but we can help you avoid a lot of those bumps. And so Hope House NoCo opened 3 years ago with a small resource center in northern Colorado, Greeley. Hope House Canyon City is a residential home in the southern part of our state. And then I mentioned Orange County will open in the next 6 months. And we're in the process of developing sort of an entire process or program to teach others how to do what we do. And these are women who just felt a tap on their shoulder. We're helping them start their own nonprofit. So we don't do their fundraising. They're their own nonprofit. They have their own board of directors. They do their own fundraising and their own programming, but we teach them how to do all of it. We give them all the tools and walk alongside them and coach them, because ultimately what I talk about in my book is there's a little mama out there somewhere, not in Denver, Colorado, somewhere in Tennessee or Arizona or Kentucky or North Dakota, curled up with her little baby, and she's terrified. And she wants to be a good mom worse than anything in the world, and she doesn't know how. And she just needs someone to come alongside her. And you might be that person. You might be that person that God's bending down and just whispering to that little girl, just hold on, I'm sending my people. And you're his people. And he's sending you, whether it's to teenage moms or to some other form of ministry that pulls or tugs on your heart, he's sending you.
I have tears in my eyes right now. That is beautiful. I'm so encouraged and excited for you, Lisa, and your ministry to flood our country with so much hope and encouragement for these young mamas who are desperately searching for this resource. It's incredible.
Thank
As
you.
we wind as we wind down here, I would love to know if there is a Bible verse that you share with those young mamas who are just starting out their journey with you.
Jeremiah 29:11 is our bedrock verse. It's the verse we share with all of our moms. For I know the plans I have for you to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. And our mamas, most of the time, they feel like if there is a God, he must either he hates me or he's super mad at me because why does
Mm,
my life look like this? And for them to be able to be in relationship with women who, and you have to be in relationship. You can't just say, hey, you should believe that God has a plan for you. The longer we can be with them and work with them and develop these really, truly deep, loving relationships, the more they begin to grasp that verse that God really does have a plan for me. He has a hope and a plan, and He wants to prosper me and prosper my children. And it's something they can hold on to, and we get to be the living example of that. So thank you. We love that verse.
that is beautiful and perfect. Perfect verse. I love that one myself. So, Lisa, could you please pray for the young mom that's listening, or maybe it's a grandma who's listening who is looking for hope for their family and they just are kind of at wits' end and they just, yeah, they're looking for hope.
God, you are the God of all things. You're the God of little ones with dirty diapers that have to have baths, seemingly endless loads of laundry, seemingly endless days of trying to figure out how to parent through the many obstacles that come in the way of mommies and daddies who are just trying to do the best thing for their kiddo. And oh Lord, our mommies get tired, and you know that. And when they're little, you're so physically tired. And then Lord, when our mamas become mothers of teenagers and young adults, we're so mentally tired because the things that our young adults are dealing with are so big and so hard, and we don't have the answers. God, I pray that you would come alongside the moms who are listening right now, that you would remind them that you've got it, that you go before them as a mother, that you chose them, whether you're a teenage mom or an older mom. God chose you to be the mother of your child, and He doesn't make any mistakes. So, God, I pray that you would remind her daily that you're there, that you picked her, that she's exactly who she wanted, who you wanted to be the mother of her children, even on the days when she yells. Even on the days when she has those mom fails, even on the days she doesn't have the answers for her young adult kids who are going through really tough stuff, you still picked her. So come alongside her, encourage her, hold her up, and Lord, as you tap on her shoulder some days to maybe fill her heart with a little something that might be more than mothering, but something new or something different. God, I pray that you would help her to say yes and say yes in a big way, because she will get to know you more and more as she says yes to you. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being here. And I want to make sure that you share with everyone how they can find your new book.
Absolutely. It's on Amazon, A Place to Belong. You can also visit our website, hopehousecolorado.org, O-R-G. But just go to Amazon and type in A Place to Belong by Lisa Stephen with no S on the end. You always have to say that, and you'll find it easily. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. And everyone, yes, definitely please go grab a copy. It is an amazing book.